Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going, old friend?
Not great, Bob.
Not great. Yes. So we thought we better talk about what's going on, and that is Ohio State, quote, pausing all on-campus voluntary workouts. That news came down Wednesday night, and I don't know that it was you see it happening elsewhere, so you can't totally be shocked by it, but it still catches you off guard and it's disappointing. Tom, how did it catch you?
Well, yeah, we told this story on the Morning Scoop episode that will drop today. But yes, I was out coaching my daughter's softball team, so it caught me standing in the third base coach's box, wondering why is my phone buzzing so much? It's 7 o'clock on a Wednesday evening. This should not be a busy time, but here we are.
And that's all you always know it's going to be good news when your phone just keeps blowing up at a random, just some random time when nothing else is going on. And I'm
Yeah,
sure
yeah,
you're thinking,
yeah.
this is
Well,
probably
yeah,
good news.
yeah. Maybe I won the lottery, and I'm just the last one to know. That's probably what this is.
Big news. But no, unfortunately, not for Tom or really anybody. It was the shutdown of voluntary workouts, and the teams impacted the men's and women's basketball team, field hockey team, the football team, the men's and women's soccer team, and women's volleyball. Due to some positive COVID-19 tests, and Ohio State's not saying who or how many from each program. Our Alex Gleitman was told from a source that it's a small number. There's a small number of football players, at least, that have tested positive. And so now, when those players test positive, they will self isolate for at least 14 days, receive daily checkups from OSU medical staff, the athletics medical staff. And if they're living alone, they will isolate at home. If they, did I say living at home or living alone? If they're living alone, they will stay isolated there. If they have roommates, they'll stay isolated separately from their roommates. And then they live like that for 2 weeks for at least 14 days until, however many negative tests they then have. So that's the number. Actually, Tom, that's not the number because Ohio State won't give us a number.
Yes, we know x equals or greater than 1. That is what we know. And yeah, greater than or equal to 1 and less than roughly 120, and a few. So a few to me means 1 to 6 or so, but somewhere in that neighborhood. This does not sound like this is a massive outbreak within the team. This sounds like it may be a couple people. And you made a good point on our board on Wednesday night. This is, of all the times this could happen, if you want to be optimistic about this is not a terrible time for it to happen. And this would be, if you were going to shut things down out of an abundance of caution before a very important start of this process, this would be the time you would shut things down purely out of an abundance of caution.
Yep. With the mandatory workouts starting next week, presumably, Ohio State has not said they are starting next week, but next week is the first time that the NCAA's allowance of the mandatory workouts will start for teams who open their season on the September 5th weekend, which would be Ohio State. So they could start on the 13th with their mandatory workouts. So pausing now and taking a break for a few days, get everything cleaned and make sure everything is ready. Perhaps you found some areas of, I wouldn't say weakness, but maybe some areas that could be cleaned up even better to prevent this from happening again. And so maybe you work harder on that. But these are voluntary workouts. It's real easy to say, you know what, let's not do this because things get really important next week. And so then you turn the focus towards getting ready for that. And that's when things get real. That's when, presumably, if a player or 2 or 7 comes down with COVID, they're isolated and the workouts continue. And then after workouts, there's the quote unquote spring period that Ohio State will be that all teams have been granted for, I think, 10 days or 2 weeks, and then you have fall camp after that. This is the start of that process of getting to fall camp and getting to the games. And now is when you can't, after this, once that starts, you can't just start scrapping things. Now is when you have to, if you're going to try to have this season, and we believe they are because they're trying to have this season, at some point you have to continue to move forward. And that's what next week will be. So to say, to then just pause everything right now, makes sense. It's easy, gives everybody a chance to just, a 30,000-foot view and get their breath and then get started next week, knowing that ideally it's not going to stop until January.
Yeah, this is not the time to just mash the panic button just yet. If 2 weeks from now they're in the middle of the workouts or they're in that kind of spring period and then they shut stuff down, that's when it's, oh, this is a very bad sign for the start of the season. This is a point when you can still be trying to do this as a precautionary thing because you get people on campus for the mandatory workout starting on the 16th. You want to have 0 people in that building who have COVID in their bodies. And the best way to do that is to make sure you're keeping everyone separate. No one is going to have, the low viral load for the first couple days or any of that stuff. Because it sounds like some of the testing, I talked to a doctor tonight about this just to kind of get a sense for what does this mean? If someone tests negative, how likely is it if they've been exposed that they could later test positive? And he said, basically it's, you can for the first couple days, you don't necessarily test positive because the viral load in your body is low enough that it doesn't register as a positive on the test. So you could be walking around with it without knowing it, and you could theoretically even be spreading it to other people at that point. So if you keep everyone isolated for a few days, you sort of let the thing run its course, you keep everyone spread out, you don't let people spread it to additional people. When they come back, you test them again. Ideally at that point, for sure, yes, no one in this building has this right now. You start clean. The people who have it right now can take a few days, a week, 2 weeks, whatever, they said they're quarantining for 2 weeks. You take those 2 weeks, you sit that out, you come back when you've got it out of you, and you can hopefully stay at 0 at that point, or as close to 0 as possible. But by starting fall mandatory workouts at 0, that gives you a chance to potentially stay there or stay close to there. If you're sort of starting with 6 positives, 8 positives, that's going to be kind of hard to manage. I read someone in a different context saying that you're just kind of trying to live in the burning house at that point. Like, it's like, well, this isn't great, but we can, it's the this is fine dog. Like that's kind of how life is if you're just trying to manage it at a so-so level. So yeah, if they can take these sort of precautionary steps now and get it back to 0, where there's 0 people with the virus in that building, that potentially sets you up for a more successful summer and fall period.
Now, I have had people in my mentions telling me that young people don't die from this. And while not a large percentage of young people die from this, saying you won't die from something isn't exactly a vote of confidence for it being safe. Like, you're probably not even going to die is not something that's going to make me want to go do something. But I don't necessarily like that as a reason to play. Do the players get hospitalized? It doesn't sound like it. Is it safer for young people than older people? Yes, that's football though. That's the nature of football as well. Like, yes, it's safer for the 20-year-olds than the 70-year-olds. That is true. Good point about that. But there's when it's it's hard to like put a how bad does it need to be, or how many players are you willing to sacrifice? And so I wonder like how many players need to test positive before the mandatory stuff gets shut down, because we all know that these things are going to happen because you're planning for it. You're seeing it in other sports, and that was one of the things about college football being starting well after Major League Baseball and soccer and all of these different things. You get to see how they react to it, how prevalent it is in the viruses and getting through all of these bubbles and whatnot. But what's the number of players, or could it be? It may not have to be a large number. It could just be the quarterback room before you're like, that's it. Maybe not for a practice, but certainly for a game. And I can see games that are scheduled definitely not happening, but not from, but like that week, like planning to play and be like, well, now we can't because our fifth quarterback is our punter and we're not going to do that to him.
The Tom Tupa era part two. It's going to be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was someone on Twitter who I mentioned, I think both of us at some point on Wednesday in a different context, but about, you know, are you going to see teams have to forfeit? Are you going to see teams have to play people out of position? And, the example he gave was, are you going to have defensive ends playing offensive line? Like, you can't do that. Like, that's not feasible at this level. So if something does go through the offensive line room somewhere and you don't have healthy offensive linemen, they just can't play that week. And there has been the idea put forth that leagues may be looking at trying to space things out a little bit more. So maybe, one hypothetical that I've seen is you get rid of the non-conference schedule and you just stretch the season out a little bit. So you play a game or two and then you have a week off, and you play another game or two and then you have a week off. And then if someone tests positive, you have these built-in kind of buffers in the season where if you have a bunch of people test positive, you've got a week or two to, maybe you miss one game, but then you have another week after that to potentially get everyone back healthy again and be able to play. The idea that if you're not going to die from it, it's okay. Like, Johnny Knoxville built a great career around that, but I don't know if that's the best. There's a lot of stuff that I wouldn't die from that I wouldn't particularly necessarily want to do anyway. And as you mentioned, there's older coaches, there's older trainers. All these people have parents. All of them have, grandparents and roommates, and those roommates have parents. And there are people who every year you see those inspiring Tom Rinaldi stories about the player who's come back from cancer. Well, that means there are college football players that have cancer somewhere, and some of them may not know it yet. And some of them, every year there's someone that has an undetected heart condition that they just found out about that they then have to medically retire for, and they don't know about it yet. And you can have players with diabetes or any other number of comorbidities with this that it could create an issue. And it is easy to just kind of dismiss it as, well, they're not going to die. And realistically, the odds are relatively low that any individual college football player is going to die from this, or but you've had guys who are relatively young have pretty serious complications out of this. And if you have lung scarring and then you can't play football anymore because of this, is that is that something each of these guys is willing to do? And do they understand the risk? Have they been talked to about the risk? And how has that conversation been framed with players at all these different institutions around the country? I mean, those are all interesting questions. And I think Ohio State generally does a very good job of informing their players about all of this kind of stuff, and having in all sorts of different contexts, from Real Life Wednesdays and all of the other responsibility things that they talk about. But you have to kind of let them know, like, okay, you may feel like you were invincible as a 21-year-old college athlete. You are not invincible. That is not true. And there are risks in all of this, and there are risks involved in playing football in all sorts of different areas. So that's something that these guys have all assumed. But that's something that is, if you're just someone who's watching on TV, it's a lot easier to just kind of hand wave that as like, well, that's fine. You just play through that. But that when it's your life, or you are someone that has parents who might have comorbidities or whatever, then that might be a little bit more of a tricky conversation or decision.
Yeah, and when you talk about the impact that this has, we don't even know the long term ramifications because we're 6 months into this thing. And long term, what we know now is, well, here's what happens in 3 months, or this is what, we don't know what kind of long term impact this has on a body, young or old. And maybe it won't be any, and hopefully it won't be, but we know there's some significant issues, like you said, lung scarring. Saw a report of brain damage. I mean, there's all very serious things, and no, it may not end up in death, but it also may not end up in reasons to play. It's like, nah, it's just a little brain damage. Of course, then we get into the CTE area of football, and maybe there's that's a whole another
that's a
subject.
Different episode.
That's a different episode. Let's stick to this one. The thought that you just play 10 games, or just the fact that you're trying to make the season malleable. What about also then for teams that don't make the Big Ten championship game, playing a couple games in December as well? Get that revenue, create content, like give TV networks inventory. You have Big Ten championship game the first week of December. Next week it's Wisconsin against Illinois. Who knows? But you can continue to stretch out, and I think with as I said, malleable as everybody's being. Like normally we can't play them because it takes 7 years to schedule somebody. Like they're going to be maybe doing stuff in the span of 7 days or 7 weeks, and maybe you can create some things that way as well, and try to get the most out of what is going to be a very unusual season. Maybe you might have a team playing 11 Big Ten games because, you know what, let's go play a couple teams from, if it's Wisconsin, let's see what Indiana is doing. Let's see what not Rutgers, Maryland is doing, and see if they want to play here in December. Or maybe we see something like that, and as we gain more of a control, maybe the season moves later into the season as well, just because why not?
You mentioned Rutgers, and this seems like this has been, I think, a very negative podcast. We're not trying to be pessimistic, but let's take an optimistic spin at this. Earlier this week, Rutgers announced that they will combine a majority of remotely delivered courses with a limited number of in-person classes this fall. So if Rutgers is not doing in-person instruction, maybe Rutgers won't play football, and maybe this will be a Rutgers-free football season. So there's something to be optimistic about right there.
And that increases Ohio State's chances of winning the East.
Yes. Well, maybe. They have to run the math. Have to get our new stats wizard on that one. I'm not 100% sure the math checks out there. But, as to your idea of, Wisconsin, Illinois playing in December, I think we all know that I live my life with the motto, I always wish there was more Illinois football on. That's every day. I mean, how many times have I said that in this podcast? Literally thousands.
Right.
What you may run into issue-wise there is there are a lot of schools that are planning to have students leave campus at Thanksgiving and not come back until after Christmas break. So if you're doing that, that may complicate that a little bit. But, in general, I think that's, you're right in that you're going to have an opportunity for flexibility and some weird stuff. I mean, you've seen reporting that teams may play each other twice. This could be the year that Ohio State plays Michigan twice, and this could be the year that you only play teams where you're driving, within a driving distance of each other, or, this is going to be a very unusual, different season, and that could turn into something really interesting. Like if this is the year Ohio State plays Michigan twice, that's going to be pretty interesting. That's going to be kind of cool. You do a home and home series with Michigan maybe this year. They want to trim down that all-time series advantage. What better way than do 2 in a year? That's but right now, what is your guess as to how many games they play, or alternately, looking at, say, the Oregon trip, how likely is it that, in your mind right now, that Ohio State makes the Oregon trip, and how likely is it that you and I are there covering the Oregon
Mhm.
trip? Because we have tickets, we have plans to be there, we are hoping to be there, we would love to be there. How likely is it in your mind that that actually happens this year?
I don't know what the percentage is. I would be surprised if Ohio State goes. So does that make it? Is that under 49? Is that under 50% on
Probably,
that
yeah.
one? And I would be shocked if we were there as
Mhm.
well. So what's that? Around 20% or something like that. So I don't expect to be there, and I will be quite surprised if Ohio State is, because there are easier solutions, you know. And if you're trying to play from September to December, maybe don't take a trip across the country, you know? So
Mhm.
I think like it's it's a way to maybe guarantee more of the season by not making that trip. And I don't know that Oregon would be that upset by not having 100 people coming from Ohio, Central Ohio, right now, which is trending redder and redder in terms of the COVID testing. So yeah, I'm under 50% on that. Where are you for the Buckeyes going?
Yeah, yeah. I would say, yeah, 50-50 or under that the game happens. And yeah, I would be, at this point, I would be extremely pleasantly surprised to be getting on an airplane for Oregon in early September.
Would you
That
though?
I would,
Oh,
I mean, if
you'd
the
be
trip
surprised. Would
happened,
you be happy? Like,
I would.
would you comfortable?
Let's see how things are going in early September. There's it, if the world is blowing up to the degree that it would probably be required to not have a trip across the country, then it probably would be a good idea to not have a trip across the country. If things are at a point where Ohio State feels comfortable traveling across the country, Oregon feels comfortable having Ohio State travel across the country, and Oregon is saying, "Come on in and sit in our press box and you know, welcome friends," then that's probably a pretty good indication that it's things are reasonably okay. I think there's enough risk aversion in the college football leadership and the university leadership level that it is probably going to be self-evidently okay to do it if they're saying it's okay to do it. That is a risk averse group of people who are probably very concerned about liability in a lot of ways, and who, if things really get bad, that could create a long period where they don't have anyone on campus, and that'll create some real financial hardships. So, university leadership is probably incentivized to be, more on the cautious side than people might think they should be on a lot of this stuff. So if they're welcoming us out there, I would probably, just based on that alone, feel reasonably comfortable going. Also, I just really want to go. Like that, when we laid out that trip, it was like, man, we have some fun high school football stuff coming
Yeah.
on that trip. We've got some fun college football just coming on the trip. That's a part of the country I've never been to. That's a stadium I've always wanted to see, and it'll be a real bummer if we don't get to go. But yeah, right now, I would be pleasantly surprised to be getting on that airplane in September.
I would not be comfortable for this reason. Say things are going really, really bad, and then they're like, "No, no, come on out." To me, that sounds like a trap. Like they're going to capture us and harvest our organs. And I would be cautious of going out west at a time that seems dangerous. I would just, what? I'm just gonna stay home. I'm gonna keep my kidneys and both of my livers.
You say this is Autzen Stadium. It looks like a bathtub full of ice. I'm confused. It looks different on TV. Is this?
And on the mirror it just says "Go Ducks." Um, I think since they're probably not going to do our suggestion of the hubs of like play all the games, half the games in Indianapolis, half the games of Detroit, which I still think would be great. But I think just limiting travel ensures more of the season. It doesn't guarantee anything, but removing that from the equation probably makes everybody feel a little bit better. And right now, just getting people to feel better, I think would help calm things down. I'm also very interested to see how things are next week when the workouts and everything get going. Do schools get wrapped up in the fervor, or are they just straight ahead? Like, yes, we know this is all going on, but we're doing our part to make sure that we're safe. So anytime you can eliminate some of that, just the panic and the unsurety, I think it's a good thing. So as much as it pains me to say, probably scrapping the Oregon thing is a good thing. And then next year, I guess you just play at a neutral site in, say, Cleveland, something like that. Meet them in the middle in Indy, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That would be fine as well. And actually, I'm always up for a drive to Jerry World.
Are you? Because yeah, and I guess one thing that we should probably just say, since I'm sure that there will be people who interpret this entire podcast as us being fatalistic or pessimistic or friends. Both Tony and I enjoy college football, and as professional college football media members, we also have something of a vested financial stake in there being a college football season. It is in our both, from an enjoyment standpoint and also from a financial standpoint, it would be in our best interest for there to be a college football season. Tony and I are rooting very hard for there to be a college football season. I think anytime people report anything remotely negative or share an idea that is viewed as pessimistic, it is taken as these people hate America and hate college football, and they don't want to see Ohio State play football this year. Probably because they're haters. And I think it's safe to say that we both enjoy watching college football when college football is on, even when it's something stupid. I watch a lot of really stupid college football because those late night Hawaii games are fun. There's so much great stuff. College football is my favorite thing in the whole wide world outside of like direct family members. So,
and even then,
at least some. And as people who are working for a website that covers college sports, it is in our best interest for there to be college sports so that we have something to cover. That's how jobs work. So rest assured, if you are rooting for a college football season, we are right there with you. We are just letting you know what we're hearing, what we're thinking based on what we're hearing, and what's going on in the world. So do not assume that the fact that we are thinking there may not be a game at Oregon represents us hoping there is not a game at Oregon or hating the idea of a game at Oregon. There is nothing I would love more than for everything to be fine and us to be able to get on a plane to Oregon. That's just, at the moment, does not look like the most likely scenario for this fall. That's all.
Yeah. I'm willing to sacrifice that Oregon game to make sure the rest of the season can happen, to increase those odds. Because there's so much potential on this team, so much potential this season, so many great games that there's almost too much good stuff. To not have that would be devastating. And so I don't even want to talk about so what happens if the season gets canceled or gets pushed, because that's not what this show is about. We can do that. Maybe we might be doing that later on. We don't need to do it now, but we just wanted to, that was breaking news on Wednesday night. We wanted to touch base with it today and let you know that you don't have to hit the panic button just yet. As Tom said, this was an easy, and maybe they won't say it was an easy decision. It was a lot easier of a decision now, based on the parameters that everybody is working with and what's to come. The more important decision will be down the road and how they react to positive tests. So that's what will be key to watch, and we'll be hoping to hear something from Ohio State in the coming days, some sort of update on their plans moving forward, whether or not they are going to begin their mandatory workouts. There's no reason to think they won't, but until they tell us they are, I guess we don't know for sure. So hopefully they tell us they are soon. That way we can tell you, and just continue to reassure you that we all want football, and we all want football very, very badly. And please know that. Tom, anything else before we call it a night? Call it a day, rather.
Yeah, no, I think we're good. And yeah, just keep smiling. It'll be okay. We will let you know when there is serious cause for concern as far as the likelihood of any kind of a season. We're not there yet. This was not a fantastic day, but it is not also, cause for like deep existential concern about the 2020 college football season just yet. So hopefully the small step backwards that happened on Wednesday will end up being a big step forward towards getting to play at least most of a college football season this fall.
Exactly. That asteroid that was barreling down on us, the crew of the spaceship was able to split that asteroid in half, and the parts have missed us at this point. So we'll see if there's anything behind that asteroid, though, in the coming days as we learn more from Ohio State. But this was not the end of the world with this decision today. And just remain calm, and we'll see what happens. And hopefully we have football this season. And I want to thank you all for listening. As always, feel free to rate and review the show. Maybe find a happier show to rate and review, one that makes you feel better. Maybe don't rate and review this one, not in your current mood. But make sure to check out BuckeyeScoop.com for all kinds of info, and listen to all of the podcasts, of which there are many, and they are all very good. So I want to thank you all, and have a good day.